Okay, starting with the idea that the wind is coming from this direction, your thermal is coming off of the heated paddock, and it's going up off the field, and it's starting to make a cloud in this direction. You're going to enter when you see that cloud, you're going to enter from upwind, because this is where the thermal is starting from, and the thermal will be leaning towards where the cloud is made. You're probably not going to fly straight under the cloud, because if there's any wind on that day, it's going to be made on an angle. Is that pretty fair? And as the cloud is being made, it's actually going to come out and it's going to drift with the wind. Do you guys agree with that? Okay, so the cloud, as it's being made, the front part of the wind will actually drift with the wind as it's being made. So where is the thermal for this cloud? It's primarily being made upwind. Now there will be a whole bunch of other clouds in here as well, which means there's other thermals feeding this cloud as well. And when these get really big and they get taller than they are wide, they tend to get a bit of an angle head on them, and that's just called the cumulus nimbus cloud. Does anybody know what nimbus means? Rain. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that means they're going to overdevelop. That means that the humidity in here is 100%. As we know, that's where that's dew point, is where 100% humidity becomes. Dew point is a temperature where moist air becomes moisture, and it's a temperature at which that height is. Then this overdevelops, saturates with moisture, and dumps. And usually the way a cloud will dump out the back of the cloud. So all the rain that you're getting is primarily coming out the back, because the front is being fed like a Hoover vacuum cleaner. It's sucking up a tremendous amount of moist air, turning into moisture, and that can happen at an alarming rate, especially on super high elapse rates. So we want to be careful of that as well. So I hope you guys are getting some value from this. Okay, so here's your paddock or your layer of rocks. We've talked about signs, birds, other paragliding pilots. There's clouds above the thermal, and there's possibly dust being produced from the tractor, showing you where the thermals are. Okay, so just a basic idea of how to understand what makes the thermal, what triggers the thermal, and signs that the thermal's there. Okay, so now we have a pretty darn good idea that we're going to enter this thermal, because we've maybe flown into it before. We've assessed the environment. You know, you're doing cross-country flying, you can see there's a dirt field. For myself and you guys here in Woodside, Western Canada, we have these dead trees that are really quite reliable. You can see one of those, you can look over top of it. On a good day, 99.999% of the time, there's something coming off of it. It's just whether it's going to get you the height you want. And now we're just flying, and we're going to look to see what it feels like to go into a thermal. Okay, so you're flying out there, you're heading out on your cross-country day, and you want to get high and you want to go far. You might be at a strange site you've never flown before. Other things you can look for that are triggers. I just came back from Lumbee, and there's groups of logs down below on the area where they've clear cut the area, and they've stacked up some brush. That's actually a nice trigger as well. So I want to include that as well, because that group of logs and sticks that have been pushed together by the tractor is hotter than 3 degrees in that bubble of heat that's being created by all those logs stacked on top of each other. Is a really nice trigger. So keep in mind, these are the things you're looking for. Once I start heading towards that, now I'm thinking really carefully with my mind. This is where you guys are taking your jostle and turning it now into valuable signals. Okay, so this jostle you're feeling, super valuable signal. The question is, as you're flying, is it going to be on my left? Is it going to be on my right? Or am I flying straight into it? As we head into the thermal, if I feel a tiny little bit of a lift on my right, not only is my brake handle going to be lifted, but I'm also going to feel my seat being lifted as well. So it's giving you a hint that the cylinder that we're looking for of the thermal is possibly right beside you. So you're going to do what I call take a look. You're not going to start 360ing in it right away. You're just going to take a nice, soft, flat turn towards that direction and see what you've got. If the thermal is strong, it will let you know, yes, I can actually do something for you. And then as long as you have enough room between you and the trees, you can comfortably take a 360, then go ahead and take a 360. So before I even take my first thermal, I make sure I'm well enough away from the hill, the trees, the mountain, wherever you are, that I know for sure that if I find something, I want to know that I can take a 360 and I'm not going to be flirting with the trees. Pretty fair? Okay, so you get out there, and in this example, I feel a little bit of something on my right, and I'm going to take a look, and it's a slow turn about this speed. Just take a look and see if it's usable. Okay, if you've done your nice flat 360 and it's not usable, you haven't lost a lot of height because you're not taking a sharp turn. If you take a sharp turn right away, these sharp turns can lose you a lot of height, and you don't really want that when the thermals are light. It's the beginning of the day. So you're flying out a little bit farther. You're looking for something a little bit better. And as long as you've got enough room to your left and to your right behind you that you can do your turns, you might get a little bit of a lift on your left, okay? And then you can take a look at that one. Now that one might be really good for you, and you're getting some beeps on your vario, and your altimeter is saying you're going up to 2 to 3 meters a second. Well, we know that we're already needing to have the thermal go up 1.2 meters a second, and if it's taking us up to 3 meters a second, that means it's 2-3 meters a second that you're going up plus the 1.2 that you're getting. So that's a good thermal. So we would take that and we would just continually ride that up. Now, how do you know when you're in the thermal, and how do you know that you've flown out of it? Okay, so if you're flying into this part of the thermal here, and that's the first area that you identify with it, you're going to get a wing lift, either your right or your left, and if it pitches straight back, that means you've just flown straight into it, and you'll notice things get quieted a little bit. You'll see your wing coming forward, because you'll hear the air sort of slow down and start getting a bit quiet. That's your time to look up for a quick peek, watch it come forward. As it's coming forward, you check your dive. You know, some people go, hi-ya. Other people say, whoa, horsey. You don't want to dive in too far forward. And just as you checked your dive, you'll normally count 1, 2, 3 turn. Okay, you've already checked your dive. By that time, 3 is already there, so you can literally take your turn as soon as you checked your dive, because the 3 has basically already happened. So you start your turns. As you start your turns and you're going up, and you say, I'm gonna stay in this, and this is good. You're gonna go up now. If you're on the edge of the thermal, you're gonna notice that one wingtip during the turn will sometimes lose a little bit of pressure. It's not enough to give you a full tuck, but it's enough to just have you lose the pressure just a little bit. So you can say, hold it. This is I've just lost the pressure. So if I've lost the pressure on this side, that means I've just flown out of it, heading in this direction. Where's the body of the thermal? If I've just flown out of it in this direction, the thermal is over here. So I'm not going to change the direction of my turn. I'm just going to continue turning in the same direction, but I'm going to drag myself over to that side. I'm going to fly over to that side just a little bit more during the 360 turn. And 99.999% of the time, sure enough, it puts me into the center of the thermal. But being aware of your outside wingtip. So if I'm turning right, I'm landing quite hard, and I'm using just enough brake to keep my wing as flat as possible. We don't want to do any diving turns, but we want to stay relatively flat, and we want to keep the wing parallel to the ground, but we want to stay tight enough that we're not flying way outside the thermal and then way back into the thermal, because you're going to lose all the height here when you're out of it, and you're going to gain some height here when you're into it. So we want to keep the turns tight enough that you're going to stay in the thermal and you're going to go up. If I'm in this part of the turn and I feel a deflation here, where's my thermal?
Opposite side.
Opposite side, right. I'm flying here, I feel my deflation here. Where's the thermal? It's over there. So this helps you get into the center. Pretty fair? That there, as long as the thermal is high and it's a good lap straight day, you're going to get a lot of height. That will take you to thousands of feet up. Sometimes, in some areas, you might have an adjacent thermal in this area here coming off some rocks. We don't know what it's coming off of. But these thermals, this one can come up and actually join with this thermal. So right in this area here, you might hear a faster beat. What's that? Why did it all of a sudden get faster? Because two thermals are now sucking into each other like honey joining to honey, and they're going up together. So that's a really nice thing when that happens. And because as the pressure, look you guys this way, as the pressure is decreasing, the thermal is actually getting larger. So what you can actually expect is the thermal is actually growing in size this way. So you actually have more room to work with, more room to play with, and it's super easy on spring days. Our spring is April, May. All right, so that's a basic understanding of how to get into the thermal and how to stay in the thermal. On really high lap straight days, because you've learned how to figure that out, are you going to watch 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon at a place like Pemberton? Probably not, because the thermals are going to be really, really strong, and if you're not ready for that kind of excitement, you might want to launch at 10:30 in the morning, enjoy a nice 2-hour flight, and just as it's starting to build, you know what, I've had a great day, this is awesome, I'm going to land, and you know, come back up, take some pictures, and hang out with the rest of the guys. Later on in the day, 5:30, 6 o'clock, it might get, you know, mellow again. But yeah, for the cross-country guys, they're perfectly fine launching on high lapse rate days in big sites, you know, Pemberton, Golden, that sort of thing. So just remember that when these thermals are being made, they have different strengths to them based on the lapse rate. And that's so important, I have to say it again. These thermals can have different strengths based on the lapse rate for the day. Okay, so on a big lapse rate day, they're going to trigger off and they're going to go really high, but they're also going to have sharp edges. So let's change this a bit here. Let's make this thermal lean a little bit more. And as you can see, it's getting bigger as it's going higher. Okay, so the body of the thermal might be going up, say, +3 meters a second. Okay, now I'm going to introduce you to another concept. For the guys that want to fly high and fly far and want to get into the hottest part of the thermal, if the wind is heading in this direction, as we've indicated here, the arrows suggesting the wind is this way, and the wind is going to get higher as we faster as we go higher. This might even have more lean to it. The body of the thermal is going up on an angle. These are what are called the trickly bits, are back here. The part of the thermal that doesn't have a lot of power will be behind the thermal, but it's still going up. You can still utilize it. The main point I want to get to now is what's called the core of the thermal. So the core of the thermal, it's much more vertical. It's got power to go pretty much straight up with a slight bit of an angle to it, and it can be going up plus, say, 7 on a good day, +3 here, maybe +2 back here. Okay, so this is upwind. Okay, so so if the wind's coming this way, I enter my thermal, I feel the lift, oh, there's something there. I turn, yeah, I'll take that, that's good. Okay, now I'm in my thermal, oh, I got a little deflation, so I'm just flowing out, so I'm gonna go back into the thermal more. There, that's good, now it's good. Now I'm working it, now I'm working it, now I'm working it, okay, good. Now I've been going for a while, maybe, 5, 6, 7, 8 revolutions, and I'm starting to get some decent height, but I really want to make the best use of this thermal. So where is the core of this thermal? This is the hottest part of the thermal. It's got the most vertical power. I'd like to get high a little quicker. I don't want to take forever, because if I'm in a cross country race, or I'm in, I want to make a really good long day of it, and I want to get as high as I can. If the wind's coming from this way, where's the hottest part of my thermal in regards to my thermal that I'm in right now? It's going to be
upwind.
Sorry, upwind. Yes. So if the wind's coming from that way, I want to start creeping up. So I'm not going to go flying straight up for a number of seconds into wind. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do my 360. I'm going to do another 360, and as I'm doing this next 360, I'm going to creep up into wind for just a little bit. So it's 1, 2, now, and go back into your 360s. Okay, and I'm looking for the thermal. The reason why is I don't want to fly out of it. Okay, I don't want my paraglider to fly out of this thermal as I'm coming up. I want to stay in the thermal, but I'm looking for anywhere along here. I'm looking for a touch of a faster beep. I'm looking for my variable to start beeping faster and start getting higher. As soon as I know that I've gotten this area, this is going to cause my variable to start screaming a little faster. And then I know I've got the core, then I'm happy. Now I can actually work that with the outside brake and try to stay tighter. I'm going to tighten my turns because this core is smaller than the body of the thermal, but it's much more valuable. So this is where I'm going to suggest normally if I take a tight turn, I'm losing 3 meters a second because this turn is tight. This thermal is going up 7 meters a second. So if I'm potentially losing 3, but it's going up 7, how many am I still going up?
4.
4, exactly. So in this area, I want to stay tight, I want to stay in it. I'm allowed to push myself to do a 3 meter a second descent technique when I know I'm still going to be going up for at least 4 meters a second by staying in it. If I did that same technique here, what would happen? I'd be sinking as much as I'm going up.
2.5.
Well, if my technique is causing me to sink 3 and I'm only going up 3, I'm going to stay the same. So I'm going to stay flatter here. I'm going to tighten my turns here. Is that pretty fair?
Yep.
Hopefully you guys are getting some value from this. Okay, super cool. But just know, and I'm going to put this on the video just as an extra point, if you happen to lose even half of your wing on the right-hand side, lean 100% to the left and use enough brake to fly straight away from the hill. Okay, if you lose the left side of your wing, don't worry about it. Look up, see that you've still got half a wing, lean really hard, fly what you've got, it's called. I've got half a wing, I can fly it perfectly fine. This side's tucked in, I'm not worried about it right now. I'm just gonna fly this. And lean 100% this side, and just enough brake, concentrate on your direction, get away from the trees. What happens if you do absolutely nothing and you lose half your wing? There's a good chance that the drag from that collapse will cause you to turn into the collapse, and you could possibly come down into the trees. And not a happy situation. So you can fly what you've got. If you've got half a wing, fly it. Look, I know what to do. Bang, do it. Okay? Within seconds, your A's and your low B gliders, even the high B's, they'll fix themselves. My C glider, got to talk to it a little more. You've gotten the height as high as you possibly can. You're possibly at the top of the thermal, or you're now going to maybe start meeting some cloud. Okay, it's time to fly out of your thermal. Generally, if this is my upwind side, I don't want to fly straight. I generally don't want to fly straight upwind, because what am I going to be met with, as we just talked about briefly, is the core of the thermal is up front here. Okay, the core of the thermal has a lot of energy going up, but it's also got a lot of sink beside it coming down, and that's when you get your full frontals or side collapses. It's generally with the core of the thermal, which is upwind. So I'm going to go up and to the side. Okay, I'm not going to go straight out. I'm going to go out to the side because it's going to be less dramatic. Okay, so now the next part I want to talk to you guys about is when you're leaving your thermal, what should you expect? Well, behind the thermal and beside the thermal, I'll draw on this situation here, you have sink. Okay, so this is air coming down beside the thermal. This is a very interesting thing because you've worked so hard. It might have taken you, half an hour, maybe an hour to get up 6,000 to 7,000 feet. And now, as you're leaving, you find, your sink alarm's on and you're inside the sink. You don't have to accept that sink, because as you're sinking, you're coming down on a if there's a bit of wind, you're coming down on a glide that might even be like a 2 or 3 to 1. And that's not necessarily a good glide to be on, because you can see that the trees extend far beyond that. You actually need to get out of that sink. So what's the smartest thing to do when you're in big sink? I'll use the word here, big sink. Anybody know? The speed bar. Okay, so what that does is it gives you a smaller angle of attack. When you have a smaller angle of attack and you're in the big lift, you might be asking for a tuck or a collapse, but when you're in the sink, it's a different animal. It means you need to get out of the sink. You need to literally cut through the sink and get out of it. So by being leaving the thermal and flying as we normally do with the weight of our arms, you could be accepting a lot of sink here and maybe not leave the thermal until you're downward here. If you put on your speed bar, when you realize you're into the big sink, you can shorten the amount of time that you're in that sink. It might only be a few seconds as compared to a few minutes, and you could be out of the sink at that height and continue on your glide and go find yourself another thermal. Pretty fair? Okay, so these sinks are different sizes depending on the size of the thermal and where you are, and they'll have different distances that you need to get out of them. One of my first big learnings, my big aha moment, was in New Zealand. I came out of a thermal. I had worked, a long time to get up to 6,000 feet, probably about an hour. I was just very slowly going up. In that part of my thermaling, I was probably back here in the thermal somewhere. I didn't know to go up and find the core, but now I know to do that. Anyway, once I got to the top of the thermal, I thought, oh, this is great. I'm just going to go on a glorious glide sideways. Because I was going down the range, and I figured if I just go down the range, I'll catch all the other thermals that are coming up. And you would not believe how big, when I left the thermal sideways, it's kind of a hard thing because sideways is actually up this way. I'll just tell you, the sink seemed like it would go on for about half a mile. Now, I didn't know about this whole speed bar thing, so I accepted the sink all the way down. And guess what was waiting right here? Was the cliff. I was really close to the trees before I actually got back into normal wind or normal air, left the sink and got over the trees. And that day, after talking to my instructor at that time, we had a little chat about this, and I realized that the distance between here and here could have been saved if I would have used a tiny bit of speed bar. 10%, 20%, that's all you need to get through that sink. Okay guys, wind assisted thermals. When we talk about wind, we don't really like it when it comes to thermal flying. We like wind for coastal flying. Coast is where you've got the ocean here, okay, and you've got a cliff here, and you've got dynamic wind coming in, going up over the cliff, and what you have is a really nice egg of lift up front, and you can play in this for hours. And I have done this. This is the West Coast, Kiriotahi Beach. It's called in New Zealand. It's also Tauranga, New Zealand. It's also Stanmore Park, Australia. Give those a Google. This is awesome, but we're not talking about that today, because coastal soaring is another way of thinking. But I just wanted to put that up there. We're talking about wind-assisted thermals. Okay, you haven't flown for a couple months. You're dying to fly. You want to get out. It's relatively windy. You have your thermals triggering off. Okay, so if it's no wind, you know the thermal's going to be relatively vertical. That's the day we want. Little to no wind, tons of vertical thermals, lots of height, not much drift. Here's the concern for vertical thermals. You have a lot of wind, and this is going back at a 45-degree angle. This happens at Woodside as well. Pretty fair? Okay, if the thermal has that kind of drift to it, and if your mountain, in our case, our Woodside mountain, it's kind of like that. Can you see what's starting to be the concern? As I'm flying up, okay, so I've launched over here. I'm flying out, and I get into my thermal. Oh, there's my first enter of the thermal. What was that? That's a left lift. Okay, I'm circling in my thermal, but I'm noticing that my thermal is taking me quite a far distance back. What's my concern is that as I'm thermaling in this thermal and thermaling back, I'm becoming very close to the trees here to stay in that thermal. Is this a good day to be practicing thermals? No, because you could very easily catch a line, a stabilo line on those trees trying to stay under that thermal. What I would suggest at that point is leave the thermal, do some figure eight soaring on the ridge, enjoy the ridge, but keep yourself always facing away from the trees. Once you get something off of those trees and you feel there's a really good lift, don't forget, you might be catching the back end of the thermal. So if you catch another thermal in the back end, it might be over a couple hundred feet in front of the South Knoll. If you're in Woodside area, you might catch another thermal, and that might be the back end of the thermal. What are you going to do? You're going to go upwind as you're flying in that thermal to try to find the hotter part of the thermal that could be waiting for you upwind. It's still on quite a bit of an angle, but it's away from the trees, right? And this gets me high and gets me nice and far along coming out of there. Just remember, if there is a lot of thermal activity and it's on an angle, you're still going to have sink associated with that thermal, okay? So with sink and wind, this is the concern. If I'm in sink and I've got a lot of wind, not only am I going down, but I'm being held back by the wind. I'm literally coming possibly straight down towards the trees now. Okay, so this is the concern of high wind and vertical thermals with sink associated with the thermals. I mean, if I would have said that at the beginning of the video, they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? But now that you've watched this section, you now know exactly what I'm talking about. You get caught under that, a little bit of speed bar, get yourself up front. Pretty fair? All right. Wind assisted thermals. When you have a hill, okay, so let's see, here's my hill. And we've got a whole bunch of little rocks here. There's little rocks all inside the trees. Okay, so these are your trees in between, in and around the rocks. You get the idea? So this is your hill. Okay, so these thermals can sit on those rocks and they can build up layers of thermal until they become 3 degrees hotter than the surrounding air and pop off. Or you can have wind that's coming in here and assisting these thermals to be popped off. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to create, and if it's a high lapse rate day and there's a bit more wind, it's going to create these what we call like little knives coming up. They're literally useless to try to thermal in, but they smack your glider. You're coming out. It's like these little baseball bats are whacking your wing. Have you ever had that? Yeah. So you're flying out, and all of a sudden you feel this whack. Whoa! What the heck? But it's just like one little bubble of a whack. Like it's not even a column. It's just a little thermal that's got this like knife edge to it, it feels like. And they're all over the place. But they're literally useless because you go to turn it and it's like, there's nothing there. I just got whacked, but there's nothing there. Wham, there's another one. Jesus, okay, this is good and powerful, but it's like I can't actually use this. It's just like this, like I say, it feels like a baseball bat coming up and just whacking my wing. But they're all over the place, but I can't use them. This is a higher wind-assisted thermals. It's a decent lap start day, but the thermals don't have time. The thermals don't have time to build up a really nice thick thermal layer. Instead, they're assisted off by the wind, and you're like, man, you know what? I'm gonna go land. It's time for lunch. All right, why it's important to look up when you're in a thermal. You're having a glorious day. It's a perfect day. It's awesome. You're having a great time. You're going up. You're getting lots of height. You know, thousands of feet up, and you don't realize it, but you're starting to enter what I call the wispies. Okay, so when I'm thermaling, I'm looking for what? I'm looking for other pilots predominantly. I'm looking for the trees to make sure I don't go in them. So I'm very spatial aware. We're now spatial awareness, three-dimensional awareness. I've got pilots there, got pilots there, got pilots there, got pilots there, got pilots back there. Okay, I'm very aware of who else. Always be aware of who is around you as you're thermaling, as you're going up. And you're concentrating on possibly where the thermal is coming from. It could be coming from the two dead trees at Woodside. It could be coming from the bend of the road. And there's another bend in the road over on the other side. There's a little lane coming off the side. That's the trigger point. You know, you're kind of aware of where your triggers, thermal's triggering off and how you're circling up. And you can kind of see where you started and where you are now. And you can kind of line up the dotted line. You can see where your thermal is. And you're like, okay, cool. I know where I'm sort of situated in my environment. But what we forget to do is look up and see where the cloud is associated with us going up. So as you're circling and as you're going up, be aware that you could very, especially on April, May, in springtime, you could very easily end up into the cloud. And some days, you know, in April, May, these clouds can be, you know, being fed by all sorts of thermals. So you don't realize this, but all of a sudden you're like haze is starting to happen around you. Whoa, there's haze there, there's haze there. No, dude, you're in the bottom of the cloud. And if you're still in this thermal and it's live in thermal and you're in the body of the thermal, you could very easily end up into the cloud at any moment in time right now. So what do? If you have a GPS, get your coordinates and start heading out of the cloud area. You can see blue there, you can see blue there, okay? You know that you've got some blue to fly to, pick a direction, look at your GPS heading, or in my case I have a compass, and I say, okay, that's my SW. I stop my 360s and I start heading out of it. So if you go into the cloud, as you're leaving the cloud, you have a direction to not go back towards the hill. Okay, so in some places, not here at Woodside so much, but some places there's like rock right here, and the mountain is here. And here's the problem. That cloud can be right here. So as you're thermaling up in front of it, and you start going into the cloud, you enter what's called the white room. The white room is where you don't see any reference to the ground anymore. You don't see any reference to the sky.